Good morning. It's September 29th. Right, let's get started. But our financial system is a lot more complicated than the one that existed when the Fed was created in 1913. We have many different kinds of financial institutions in markets now. And as I said, the crisis was like an old fashioned bank crisis, but it happened to all different kinds of firms and in different institutional contexts. So the Fed had to go beyond the discount window. We had to create a whole bunch of other programs, special liquidity and credit facilities that allowed us to make loans to other kinds of financial institutions on the budget principle that providing liquidity to firms that are suffering from loss of funding is the best way to calm a panic. All these loans were secured by collateral. We were not taking chances with taxpayers' money, but the cash was going not just to banks, but also more broadly into the system. Again, the purpose of this was to enhance the stability of the financial system and get credit flows moving again. Let me emphasize that this is the traditional lender of last resort function of central banks that has been around for hundreds of years. That was different was What was different was that it took place in a different institutional context that just the traditional banking context. Then what was different was that it took place in a different institutional context than just the traditional banking context. Here are some of the institutions and markets that we addressed through our special programs. Banks were covered by the discount window, but another class of financial institutions, broker-dealers, financial firms that deal in securities and derivatives, were also facing very serious problems. They included Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and others. The Fed provided cash or short term lending to those firms on a collateralized basis as well. Commercial commercial paper borrowers received assistance, as did money market funds. In the modern financial system, not just mortgages, but also auto loans, credit cards, and all different kinds of consumer credit are funded through the securitization process. For example, a bank might take all of its credit card receivables, bundle them together into a security, and then sell them in the market to investors, such as mortgages are sold, and that is called the asset-backed securities market. The asset-backed securities market essentially dried up during the crisis, and the Fed created some new liquidity programs to help get it started again, which we were successful in doing. All right, one more time. Here are some of the institutions and markets that we addressed through our special programs. Banks were covered by the discount window, but another class of financial institutions, broker-dealers, financial firms that deal in securities and derivatives, were also facing very serious problems. They included Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and others. The Fed provided cash or short-term lending to those firms on a collateralized basis as well. Commercial paper borrowers received assistance, as did money market funds. In the modern financial system, not just mortgages, but also auto loans, credit cards, and all different kinds of consumer credit are funded through the securitization process. For example, a bank might take all of its credit card receivables, bundle them together into a security, and then sell them in the market to investors, much as mortgages are sold, and that is called the asset-backed securities market. The asset-backed securities market essentially dried up during the crisis, and the Fed created some new liquidity programs to help get it started again, which we were successful in doing. I should mention that although the Fed's lending to banks was totally standard lending through the normal discount window, these other types of lending require the Fed to invoke emergency authority. There is a clause 1303 in the Federal Reserve Act that says that under unusual and exigent exigent, exigent uh, circumstances, basically in an emergency, the Fed can lend to entities other than just the banks. This authority had not been used by the Fed since the 1930s. But in this particular case, with all these other problems emerging in different institutions and in different markets, we invoked this authority and used it to help stabilize a variety of different markets. Let me give you a case study that will help you understand what we did and how it helped the economy. I want to talk a little bit here about money market funds. Money market funds are basically investment funds in which you can buy shares, and the funds take your money and invest it in short term liquid assets. Money market funds historically almost always maintain a $1 share price, so they are very much like a bank, and they are often used by institutional investors such as pension funds. A pension fund with $30 million in cash probably would not put that into a bank because that much money is not insured. There is a limit to how much deposit insurance covers. So, what a pension fund might do instead of putting the cash in a bank would be to put the money into a money market fund, which promises $1 for each dollar put in, plus a little bit of interest on top, and invests in very short term, safe, liquid assets. So it is a reasonably good way to manage your cash if you are an institutional investor. As I said, the money market shares do not have deposit insurance, but the investors who put their money into a money market fund expect that they can take their money out at any time, dollar for dollar. So they treat it like a bank account, basically. The money market funds, in turn, have to invest in something, and they tend to invest in short term assets such as commercial paper. Commercial paper is a short term debt instrument. issued typically by corporations, short-term in that its maturity is 90 days or less. A non-financial corporation might issue commercial paper to allow it to manage its cash flow. It might need some short-term money to meet its payroll or to cover its inventories. So ordinary manufacturing companies such as GM or Caterpillar would issue commercial paper to get cash to manage their daily operations. Financial corporations, including banks, would also issue commercial paper to get funds that they could then use to manage their liquidity positions and to make loans to the private economy. Figure 25 is a diagram of how a money market fund works. On the left, you see investors investing their excess cash in the money market fund. The money market fund buys commercial paper, which is basically a funding source for both non-financial businesses such as manufacturers and for financial companies that would lend it to other borrowers. What happened to this arrangement during the 2008 crisis? Lehman Brothers created a huge shock wave. It was an investment bank, a global financial services firm. It was not a bank, so it was not overseen by the Fed. It held lots of securities and it did a lot of businesses in the securities market. It could not take deposits, not being a bank. Instead, it funded itself in short-term funding markets, including the commercial paper market. Lehman invested heavily in mortgage-related securities and also in commercial real estate during the 2002. By borrowing short-term, they invested like real estate buildings, which doesn't make sense at all to me right now, but back then, that looked lucrative strategies. As house prices fell and delinquencies on mortgages rose, Lehman's financial position got worse, and it was also losing lots of money on its commercial real estate investments. So Lehman was becoming insolvent. It was losing money on all of its investments, and it was becoming under a lot of pressure. And indeed, as Lehman's creditors lost confidence, they started withdrawing funding from Lehman. For example, investors refused to roll over Lehman's commercial paper, and other business partners said, well, we are not going to do business with you anymore because we are afraid you are not going to be here next week. So Lehman was losing money and increasingly unable to fund itself. It tried with the help of the Federal Reserve and the Treasury to find somebody willing either to put more capital into the firm or to acquire the firm. It was unable to do that. So on September 15th, as I mentioned, it filed for bankruptcy. This was an enormous shock that affected the whole global financial system. All right, that's it for today.